Okay, today is going to be lecture 18. We're going to be doing some selected problems from the practice quiz and the regular quiz. So let's look at number 5 on the practice quiz. Okay, so on the practice quiz, you have questions that ask you to write an equation, but you also have questions that ask you to find the missing variable. So we're going to do number 5 together. So it says m varies directly, m varies directly. So I start off by writing my m, and I have my k. That's just going to be a number. And then it's going to vary directly with the square root of t. So I need the square root of t to go right here. And since we're multiplying it by k, it's just going to go right beside of it. And then it tells us two numbers. It tells us that m is 40. So m is going to be 40. We don't know what k is yet, so I'm going to leave that as k. And then it tells us that t is 64. So under the square root, I'm going to have 64. Yes, Lori, how you doing? So I've got the square root of 64. That's going to be 8. I'll put that in parentheses since we're going to be multiplying by k. And then the 40 on the left side is still the same. So now to get k by itself, I'm going to need to do something to that 8 to get rid of it. I'm going to need to divide both sides by 8. So now that I'm dividing the right side by 8, the 8's are going to cancel out. And I'm left with k is equal to 40 divided by 8. That's going to be 5. So this is going to be my k value. And remember, k is just a number. It's called the constant of variation. So now on the right-hand side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that original equation over, but I'm going to let k be 5. So I'm going to get m is equal to 5 times the square root of t. The last thing that it tells us in the problem is t equals 49. So if I let t be 49, I get the square root of 49 is 7. And then 5 times 7 is going to give me 35. And that's my answer. So when you solve for the missing variable, you need to find k first. You need to find k first. And then after that, you can find m, the missing variable. Okay, let's try number 6 now. So for number 6, I'm given n varies jointly. So I'm going to have n equals k. And then since it's joint variation, I'm going to have two variables on the right-hand side. It's going to vary jointly with m and p. So that's going to be my equation. N equals kmp. So now what I can do is I can plug in the numbers that it gives me. It tells me n is 180. We don't know what k is. We're about to figure that out. We know that m is 20. And it tells us that p is 3. So now on the right-hand side, I have 20 times 3. That's going to give me 60. 60k. And then to get k by itself, what I need to do is I need to divide both sides by 60. So they cancel out on the right side. On the left side, I have 3 is equal to k. So now that I know what k is, I can go back, rewrite my equation where k is equal to 3. So over here, I'm going to have n is equal to 3 mp. The only thing I changed was k. So now it tells us that m is 40, m is going to be 40, and p is going to be 5. And it tells us to find n, the missing variable. So 40 times 5, that's going to give me 200. And then 3 times 200 is 600. And that's going to be our answer. So joint variation is when you have two variables like m and p, and they're both being multiplied together, and k is always going to be a part of the problem. Okay, let's do 7. 7 is going to be inverse variation. So I'm going to have a fraction where k is on top and the variable is on the bottom. It says m varies inversely, so I'm going to have m equals k over a. Because it tells me m varies inversely as a. And then it tells us m is negative 18, so I'm going to let m be negative 18. It doesn't tell me what k is, so I'm going to leave that as k. And then a in the denominator is going to be 16. So now to get k by itself, I need to multiply both sides by 16. I'll put this in parentheses because I'm going to have the 16 right beside of it. And then the 16s are going to cancel out on the top and the bottom, leaving me with just k. Over here, I have negative 18 times 16. If I want to figure out what that is, I can just multiply them. 6 times 8 is 48. Carry the 4. 1 times 6 is going to give me 6, plus 4 is 10. And then I need a placeholder 0 at the bottom. Now I'm going to take this 1 right here. I'm going to multiply it by 8 to get 8. And I'm going to multiply it by the 1 to get 1. So then when I add up these two numbers, I'm going to get 288. And it's going to be a negative. So now I know what k is going to be. It's going to be a negative 288. On the other side, I'm going to rewrite this equation. So negative 288 is at the top. and the a is still at the bottom. So the only thing I changed was my k value. So then it tells me that m equals 9. So I'm going to let m be 9. Negative 288 divided by a equals 9. So that means that a has to be a negative number for this to work. So now to get a by itself, what I can do is I can get it out of the denominator by multiplying both sides by a. So when I do that, I get 9 times a is equal to negative 288 because they're going to cancel out in the top and the bottom on this side. So the last thing I need to do to get a by itself is divide both sides by 9. When I do that, I'm going to get a negative number. I know that 9 is going to go into 28 3 times. And then 9 is going to go into 18 twice. So I get negative 32. That's going to be the missing variable. Okay. Now, the last 3 that I'm going to go over on the practice quiz are going to be the graphs at the bottom. So if you were having trouble with graphs on the bottom, pay attention because we're going to identify them as direct or inverse variation. So let's take a look at those. For number 8, I'm given this line. It's going to go directly through the point 0, 0, and it's going to kind of look like this. Notice that it's a straight line. Any line can be put in the form y equals mx plus b. We know that. If you think about it, the y-intercept is 0 because it crosses the y-axis at 0. So I'm going to replace b with a 0. And if I'm adding 0 to anything, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to get the same thing back anyways. So I get y is equal to m times x. M is the slope, but we don't know what that is yet. So I'm going to leave that as an m. So what kind of variation does this look like? It's going to be direct. For number 9, I've pretty much got the same type of graph. The only difference is it's going to have a negative slope, but it still passes through the origin, 0, 0. So this is also going to be a direct variation. Okay, the last one is 10. This one is going to look completely different from the first 2. We've got a graph that looks like this. And the next part of the graph is going to look like this. This is going to be the inverse because I'm going to have a number on top and I'm going to have x in the denominator. Notice that x can never be 0 because if it was 0, I would be dividing by 0. That's why it has a vertical asymptote right here. So this is going to be inverse. So that's the graphs at the bottom. Okay, let's do questions from the actual quiz. Okay, so on the actual quiz, we're going to be starting off with questions from the top. Number 1 tells me that y varies directly as z. It varies directly as z. So if we have direct variation, we're going to be multiplying k by the variable. So it's going to be y equals k times z. For number 3, it tells us y varies directly as x, and inversely as p. I'm going to underline the word directly because that's going to be my direct variation. And I'm going to underline the inversely. That's my inverse variation. So since it says y varies, I need to write y equals. That's going to be my variable on the left side. Since I have direct variation with x, I'm going to get y equals k times x. Remember that direct means multiplication. So I'm multiplying k by x. But since it says inversely as p, we're going to be dividing by p. So p is going to be in the denominator. That is number 3. So for these 4 questions, for 1 through 4, you're just writing out an equation. Okay, let's look at 7. Seven is going to be a word problem. It says t is going to vary inversely. So I'm going to have a fraction where k is on top. And since it says inversely with w, I'm going to have a w at the bottom. So the first thing I do is I write out my equation. And then it's going to tell me which numbers to plug in. It tells me t equals 10 and w is 12. So I replace the variables with the numbers. I need to get k by itself, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 12. So while they might cancel out on the right side, on the left side, I'm going to have 120. So this is going to be my k value. When I rewrite my equation over here, I'm going to keep everything the same except for the k. That's going to be 120. So then the last thing it tells me is find out what w is when t equals 8. So I'm going to let t be 8, keep the 120 at the top, and the w is at the bottom. So I want to get w by itself now. I need to figure out what number I need to divide 120 by to get to 8. So since w is in the denominator, I need to multiply both sides by the W. So I get 8 times W is equal to 120. The W on the top is going to cancel out with the 1 at the bottom. So now to get the variable by itself, I need to get rid of the 8. And I'm going to do that by dividing both sides by 8. So I get W is equal to 120 divided by 8. I know that 8 is going to go into 12 only once with a 4 left over. That's going to combine with the 0 to give me 40. And 8 is going to go into 40 5 times. So 15 is going to be my answer. Okay, so that's number 7. Go ahead and finish up the quiz. And that is going to be due on Sunday. All right, so if you had any questions about today's lecture, go ahead and put them down in the comments. I will get to those later. Have a great weekend. I will see the rest of you on Monday.